No one expected to see her walk through those courtroom doors. When Mariah Carey entered, the room froze. Phones went silent, reporters scrambled, even the judge paused. It wasn't just because she's one of the most iconic voices of our time, it was why she was there. Not as a performer, not as a guest, but as a witness in a case that's rapidly unraveling the image of one of the music's most powerful moguls, Sean "Diddy" Combs. Mariah took the stand with a calm that felt almost too perfect, a calm that cracked the moment she opened her mouth. "This isn't easy," she began, her voice low but steady. "But what happened, what he did, needs to be heard." And just like that, one of pop culture's most private legends pulled the curtain back on a chilling experience few ever saw coming. But the real shock came when she brought up a song we all thought was just a bop, a petty anthem with a catchy hook. What if Obsessed wasn't just shade, but a warning? When Obsessed dropped in 2009, it was instantly iconic. The glam, the mystery, the now legendary line, "Why are you so obsessed with me?" Fans guessed it was about Eminem. Blogs had a field day, but according to Mariah, that wasn't the full story. On the stand, she revealed something that stopped the courtroom cold. The song came from a place of fear, not just pettiness. She said that while everyone laughed at the drama, she was actually trying to cope with a bizarre and terrifying incident behind the scenes, one that involved Diddy himself. She explained how Diddy allegedly began mimicking her voice in private and even on stage, a twisted parody that felt more like a power play than a joke. Mariah said it wasn't satire, and it definitely wasn't flattering. "He turned my voice into a mockery. He used my tone, my mannerisms, and twisted them until I didn't even recognize myself anymore." The courtroom sat in silence as she described how powerless she felt, not just as a woman or an artist, but as someone being warped into a caricature for someone else's entertainment. And just when people thought it couldn't get darker, it did. Mariah's testimony took a darker turn when the court played an audio recording that had never been heard publicly. It wasn't a leaked track. It wasn't a remix. It was a private recording of Diddy, allegedly at a backstage after-party, imitating Mariah's voice in an unsettling and exaggerated tone, mimicking her laugh, her speaking patterns, even singing in falsetto while mocking her lyrics. Mariah didn't flinch when the audio played, but her words afterward? Bone-chilling. "That's not comedy, that's not tribute, that was a man trying to erase me and replace me." She claimed the impersonation wasn't a one-time act, it was a pattern of control. He allegedly used it to humiliate her in front of mutual industry contacts, making her the butt of jokes, twisting her brand into something grotesque. Mariah said it was his way of claiming power without leaving fingerprints. And here's the kicker. Several witnesses from past parties are now backing her up, quietly coming forward, saying they saw Diddy perform these mock routines more than once. Some even say he bragged about it. This wasn't just about ego or rivalry. According to Mariah, it was psychological warfare, and the damage still lingers. But the most jaw-dropping moment? It wasn't even the impersonation. It was what Diddy said during one of those recordings. And that's what Section 4 uncovers. As the courtroom leaned in, another recording began to play. This one wasn't a parody or a joke. It was Diddy speaking candidly. And what he said sent an icy wave through the room. "She owes me her voice." Those 5 words hung in the air like a curse. According to prosecutors, this audio was taken from a phone recording during a private conversation in 2010, shortly after a major industry event. Diddy was allegedly speaking to an associate, venting about Mariah and the way the media had praised her vocal performances that year. He continued, "Everything she is came from us. That sound, that brand, I gave her that lane." Mariah looked down as the clip played, visibly shaken. To the court, it wasn't just arrogance. It was entitlement at a terrifying scale. Here was a man claiming ownership, not over a song or a collaboration, but over someone's identity. Legal experts whispered that this wasn't just humiliating. It could point to a deeper pattern of behavior tied to control, manipulation, and psychological intimidation in the industry. What made it worse? Diddy's legal team didn't deny the voice was his. Instead, they argued he was taken out of context. But context wouldn't save him from what came next. Because Mariah wasn't the only artist with a story to tell. Mariah Carey's testimony didn't just stun the courtroom. It broke something wide open. Within 48 hours, murmurs started surfacing online. Other artists, previously silent, began liking cryptic tweets, unarchiving old posts, and in some cases, reaching out to journalists off the record. The message was clear: Mariah wasn't alone. An anonymous R&B artist reportedly contacted the court, offering to testify about similar verbal control tactics used by Diddy during their collaborations. Another pop singer hinted on Instagram Live that she too had once been warned not to outshine certain men in the room. The tone was shifting, the fear was thinning. Even behind closed doors, insiders say managers, producers, and PR teams began scrambling, trying to anticipate what other secrets could resurface. Because if Mariah, arguably one of the most protected and influential voices in music, could be targeted, then nobody was safe from the spotlight. And just like that, what started as one testimony became a domino effect. But it wasn't just celebrities and artists reacting. The court had a surprise of its own, because prosecutors weren't done. They had one more move, and it was aimed directly at Diddy's legacy. Just when it seemed the room had heard it all, the prosecution delivered a blow no one saw coming. They introduced a confidential deposition from a former Bad Boy Records executive, someone who had worked closely with Diddy during his prime. The contents? Absolutely devastating. According to the transcript, the executive recalled multiple closed-door meetings where Diddy allegedly boasted about molding female artists in his image, not just managing their careers, but reshaping how they looked, acted, spoke, and sang. One line from the deposition hit especially hard: "They don't become stars until I break them down and build them back up." The prosecution linked this mindset directly to Mariah's testimony, presenting it not as an isolated case, but as part of a long-running pattern. Control disguised as mentorship, mockery disguised as marketing, ownership disguised as creative direction. In response, Diddy sat motionless, eyes fixed forward. No outburst, no rebuttal, just silence. Because this wasn't an attack on his finances or contracts. This was an attack on the myth he built. The myth of the visionary mogul, the music kingmaker, the genius behind the curtain. Now, that curtain was starting to fall. And just as the courtroom absorbed the full weight of this revelation, someone unexpected walked in. Another icon, another potential witness. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as the doors opened once again, and in walked a face no one expected to see connected to this case, a close relative of Whitney Houston. While Whitney herself passed in 2012, her name has always lingered in conversations about power, pressure, and manipulation in the music industry. But today, it wasn't just speculation, it was evidence. The relative, whose identity remains sealed due to security concerns, claimed that Whitney had once confided in her about strange pressure from a certain executive, one who played mind games with women in music and believed he could own anyone he elevated. Though Diddy's name wasn't spoken aloud in that moment, the courtroom didn't need it spelled out. The timing, the parallels, the tone, it all fit too neatly. The relative even described a specific incident where Whitney allegedly walked out of a meeting in tears after being told she needed to lower her voice, not in pitch, but in power. The implications were clear. Mariah's story may be part of a much larger pattern, a pattern involving some of the most iconic and tragic voices in music history. And now, that history was being rewritten in real time in front of the entire industry. But if the court thought this was the emotional peak, they were wrong. Because what came next wasn't about stardom, it was about survival. Behind the diamonds, the chart toppers, and the diva persona, Mariah Carey revealed something far more raw: a life lived under siege. On the stand, her voice wavered. Not from drama, but from the weight of finally saying out loud what she'd buried for years. People saw the gowns. They didn't see the fear. She admitted that behind closed doors, she often second-guessed her lyrics, her public appearances, even her own voice. "I would hear echoes of him in my head, mocking me, making fun of my tone, my choices. I started wondering if maybe I really was ridiculous." She described avoiding interviews, canceling performances, and retreating into silence, not because of illness or diva demands, but because the mental toll had become unbearable. According to Mariah, Diddy's impersonations weren't just offensive, they were strategic, designed to weaken her confidence, chip away at her identity, and keep her from pushing too far into his territory of influence. At one point, she recalled walking into an award show in 2011 and hearing someone backstage joking in a falsetto voice, mimicking her exact laugh. "I knew exactly who had started that, and I knew I couldn't say a word, not if I wanted to keep working." This was more than emotional distress. This was psychological sabotage, layered, sustained, and expertly masked behind industry glamour. But the weight she carried alone, it wasn't hers anymore. By testifying, she handed it back to the person who put it there. Mariah's testimony didn't stay confined to the courtroom. Within hours, the internet exploded. Hashtags like #1 I stand with Mariah and #1 Diddy exposed began trending worldwide. Fan accounts, music historians, and even former industry insiders started resurfacing old interviews. Videos where Mariah seemed guarded, clips where she nervously laughed off disrespect, and moments that suddenly carried a new, disturbing context. A resurfaced 2010 interview in particular gained traction. In it, a talk show host jokes about a Diddy impersonation, and Mariah's smile visibly fades. At the time, no one thought much of it. Now, that clip is being dissected frame by frame. Celebrities began weighing in too, some cautiously, others boldly. One former collaborator of both Mariah and Diddy tweeted, "We all knew." She just finally said it out loud. The industry was no longer unified in silence. It was splitting publicly for the first time. Even brands that once partnered with Diddy began pulling back, quietly deleting endorsements and canceling upcoming campaigns. His legacy, once bulletproof, was now bleeding out in real time. Not from tabloids or speculation, but from the mouths of legends. And yet, through it all, Mariah remained composed. No rage, no revenge speech, just truth. Spoken clearly, finally, and with the kind of power no voice impersonation could ever steal. But there was still one thing left. The moment that would define it all. The courtroom had heard enough. The recordings, the testimonies, the cracks in Diddy's empire. It all led to this. Mariah's final statement before stepping off the witness stand. And it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't dramatic. It was raw, stripped down, and unforgettable. She looked straight at the jury, then at Diddy and said, "You don't own people just because you help them rise. You don't get to rewrite their story because you gave them a platform, and you definitely don't get to take someone's voice, because mine was never yours to begin with." There was no applause, no outburst, just silence, the kind that only truth can leave behind. Mariah stepped down. The judge called for a recess, and the world outside continued to spin, now carrying a new version of the Mariah Carey story. One not built solely on glitter and high notes, but on courage, survival, and reclaiming power. Diddy didn't speak that day. His lawyers did. But none of it erased the weight of her words. Because in that courtroom, it wasn't just about justice. It was about every artist who had ever been silenced, every voice that had ever been stolen, every yes that was really a scared no. Mariah Carey didn't just testify, she rewrote the ending. And now, the music industry is left to answer one chilling question. Who else still thinks they own someone's voice?